Thanks for tuning in to Men for the Win, a podcast hosted by David Kufis and Dan Thompson, two avid fans who appreciate well-played baseball, especially when it's done by the Twins. Men for the Win is sponsored by the Grand Group with Edina Realty. Are you looking to purchase a new home in the Twin Cities area? Or perhaps you're trying to sell your current home? Whether you're upsizing or downsizing, the Grand Group with Edina Realty will meet all of your housing needs. Contact the Grand Group by emailing thegran, G-R-A-N, group at edinarealty.com or call them by phone at 612-817-8751. The Grand Group with Edina Realty, 3-time Minneapolis-St. Paul Magazine Super Agent Award winners. On this episode, David and Dan recap the Twins' 2-game series against the Los Angeles Dodgers. Thanks for listening. Enjoy. Thanks for tuning in to Men for the Win. My name is David Kufis. With me, as always, is Dan Thompson. After a long absence, Dan and I are reunited in studio. I had to put up listening to Hoax for the last couple of episodes, ragging on me about musicals, ragging on me about my thoughts about the Twins and their prospects for this season. Dan, I gotta say, I don't know how much I enjoy being a listener and not a participant in the podcast.
We had a great time without you, though. We made so many references to musicals that I just think went totally over your head. Did you even catch the 2 titles were musical references?
No, I did not.
That's because they were so good that they made sense anyway. One other thing, though, we used a Sound of Music reference as a title in the playoff series against the Astros. Did you realize that that's what you were doing?
Yes, likely.
I'm 17, going on 18, going on 19.
Yeah, I thought it was one of my better titles, to be honest.
It was.
With you. I was pretty impressed with myself.
Because it was an allusion to a musical, David. That's what made it so great.
No, that's not why. That's not why. It was the cleverness, Dan, of the title, not the object with which it referenced.
All right, since we're complaining about things, so I've been meaning to say this for a while. You know how sometimes announcers will truncate the word velocity, and they call it velo? That drives me nuts. That doesn't make any sense to me. It doesn't sound like the word, right? Shouldn't it be, it should truncate the actual phonemes, and it doesn't even do that.
Okay.
Does that not bother you? The other one was in I think it was game 1 where the Dodgers announcers, because I watched the recap too just to make sure I didn't miss anything, and they kept calling high fastballs cheddar.
Yeah.
Come on, that's lazy.
I don't know.
Just call it a high fastball. Be descriptive, not metaphorical or similaical or whatever. Come on.
You're an English teacher.
I know, and I don't like unnecessary flowering of language, right? It should say what it needs to say, right? John Mayer was right.
Yes. Great.
Anyway,
what is this? What are we even
What
doing?
are we doing?
Folks, you can tell we are procrastinating pretty hard because this was a pretty terrible series. The good news, Dan, we don't have to play the Dodgers again
until the World Series.
And likely
David.
we won't see them for the for the entirety of the season. Yes, you're right. Pending a potential World Series matchup. But the Twins are swept by the Dodgers, not only in this series, but in the first series as well. So they go 0 for 4. Not great. Couple of impressive notes about this series. To have 5 errors in 2 games, pretty impressive. Not many teams could pull that off, Dan, but the Twins managed it.
No, and also, by the way, the Dodgers have won 10 games in a row. They're far and away ahead of even the Padres. The Padres are a good baseball team, and there's still 16 or 17 games against the Padres. We do have to pay attention to the wild card standings now, David, because Cleveland actually passed the Twins now. They're a game ahead in the Central.
I don't want to say that me not being on the podcast had an impact here, but I'm just saying I stepped away. When I left, the Twins were in first place, sole possession of first place, and now I come back and they're not even in first place. They're in second place.
I know, 7-9 since the All-Star break now. They just can't put together winning streaks. They can put together these 3-game losing streaks, which is what they're on now, but they need, I think Dick Bramer pointed this out, they need a 5-game winning streak. They need something, and maybe they can do it here against the Angels and Royals and Rangers.
Well, I think they need 7 of 9. I think that's what they need out of these next ones to still sort of keep in the hunt and to get back to that American Central lead position.
Well, here, we should talk about this series, David, because there were things to talk about.
Series recap.
Not really, Dan. like you can say that there was stuff to talk about. I suppose I don't want people to turn off quite yet. If you could listen to the end of the podcast, that'd be great. But it's not going to be enjoyable, folks. I'm so sorry about this. Twins lose game 1, 10-3. Twins have 2 errors. They do have 7 hits. So, I guess there's that. But honestly, anything that the Twins did in this game, it was meaningless by the time that they did it. I guess that's not 100% true. The top of the second inning, they tied it. It was a 1-run game for a couple of minutes there.
Yeah, I mean, playing catch-up against the Dodgers just isn't where you want to be, especially with a lineup that's pretty battered right now. I know Buxton played. He had a late home run that didn't really matter in the final. Urshela had a hit, but you got Polanco going 0 for 4 with 3 strikeouts. Miranda after him, a couple strikeouts 0 for 4. Kepler, who we'll talk about later. Even Sandy Leon couldn't get a hit.
Joe Ryan's on the mound, and he does not look good. I mean, even the outs didn't look good, Dan, and that's when you know it's a rough outing for the pitcher, when the bats are flying off the ball, even on the outs.
And yet he threw 110 pitches. It was like, Rocco was like, we are getting 5 innings out of you, Joe Ryan. What is it with Joe Ryan that just he's okay with leaving him out there as the sacrificial lamb?
Do you think that there's something to be said about him coming up through college and like maybe his arm is just sort of used to that stamina that's required?
I'm sure there is that too. And obviously Rocco must think that he can handle it mentally. Like he can take a shellacking. He went down pitching okay, but he was overmatched. I mean, this is a veteran team. There are so many all-stars on this Dodgers team. It's just not even fair to throw a rookie out like that.
No, and I mean, when you got Urias on the other side, just throwing heat.
Yeah, he was great. 7 innings, 1 earned run, 8 strikeouts. The Twins just could not keep up with him there. And I was looking at the pitching matchups in this series, and I was thinking, gosh, you kind of wish they were just throwing Barcher out there, Bundy and Archer, just to kind of like say, all right, guys, well,
but at the same time, like Rocco did a pretty good job managing this loss, Dan, because he only had to use McGill and Pagan, 2 guys who you wouldn't want to use in high leverage situations currently anyway.
He does manage losses really, really well. A couple other things, there was a moment. So Celestino was playing center in for Buxton, who's they revealed later in the series that the reason that he's been staying out is because of a play at the wall in San Diego where he went up to try to steal a home run, came down, and it seems to have tweaked his knee a little bit. So that's why he's been DHing more. But there was a ball where Celestino came in and dove, missed it. I bet Buxton gets that on a line, saves a run or two. I get that the game is already, the Twins are already behind, but it was that kind of little bit of play. And we saw that with Celestino in game 2 as well, on ball back in center that he couldn't come up with. You really wanted Buxton.
To be fair, Buxton would have caught that, and Celestino should have caught that ball.
Absolutely.
Like that was one that, he even had the line on it, but he at the last second, he took one step too far before jumping, and it just threw the whole catch off.
Well, then let's go in and talk about game 2 a little bit more. The Twins lose this one, but they do have a lead in this game. They end up losing it 8-5. They had a 3-2 lead with a Polanco home run in the third, which, David, I wanted to say, I was so close to texting you guys to call that home run, but then after strike 1, I chickened out.
Yeah, you should have done it, Dan.
Does
because
that
it doesn't count now.
If I tell you that I was going
there are
to
no
call
receipts. No. Did you write it down in a diary and you're going to fax it to me? What are you talking about?
No, that wouldn't even be time-stamped accurately, David. So we can't.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Show me the receipts if you're going to say you made a call.
I have no
granted,
receipts for it.
At least do what I do. Just send a call every other at bat, and then sooner or later you're bound to get one, and you'll have the receipts.
But in that moment, I thought, I think the Twins could really hang on to this, especially after Sanchez hit that home run in the 5th. They got a 4-2 lead, and I'm thinking they got all these bullpen arms, but it didn't work out that way.
No, it was good to see Sanchez get in on the action, though, and put a good swing on a ball for once.
Yeah, he's been really quite awful. And that was the problem, too. I'm looking at this Twins lineup, and again, the bottom 3 are Cave, Beckham, and Sanchez. Beckham's DHing. This felt like a lineup with like Jason Bartlett DHing, like from 15 years ago. They're so thin right now, clearly, in the lineup. And I get that they're just going to have to try to get healthy and swing their way out of it.
Did you see the replays they were showing of Morneau hitting homers against the Dodgers way back when? And he even made a comment that like the video footage looked like it was from the 60s. It didn't look like it was from like the early 2000s.
Well, that might have been like the last time the Twins actually beat the Dodgers. Like it's been so long.
It was 5-3. They won that game. So we can hang our hat on that, Dan.
Well, anyway, other thoughts on this game, David?
So the only other thought I wanted to say is that Joey Gallo has had a rough go of it. But even the worst Yankees, Dan, apparently own the Twins. Even the worst Yankees, who, so bad, Dan, so bad that they got traded away, and they still managed to destroy the Twins.
Yeah, when Joey Gallo came up, and this was with a couple guys on, the Twins are down at that point 5-4, but the game's still kind of within reach. It's in the 7th inning, but you get Griffin Jacks up there, and you think Griffin is no match here for Joey Gallo.
To a little callback to the very first episode of this season, Dan, Griffin Jacks is not the man.
No, he's not. And there's the thing, he was throwing 97, 98 earlier in that, but I think, not in that moment. A couple other things to point out about this game. Luis Ariz actually does get 3 hits. His average is back up to 333. It's 3 games in a row now that he's played in, that he's had 3 hits in them. And then also, I don't know if you were still watching closely in the bottom of the 8th, but the Twins finally did get a 1-2-3 inning in the bottom of the 8th. It took a challenge because the play at first was pretty close, but that was their only 1-2-3 inning of the entire 2-game series. series.
Oof. Well, I do have to say, too, on that play, to me, I would have called them out on the field. Like, it didn't, I mean, it was close, yes, but it looked out to me.
Yeah, and even at that point, I mean, it was pretty clear the Dodgers were going to win that game. Though the Twins do threaten in the ninth to get a couple guys on. They actually do score a run on a wild pitch. And by the way, the boos for Carlos Correa, David.
It was aggressive, certainly. And part of that is what I wanted to mention. It just seemed like these Dodger fans were really invested in the game. If you go to Target Field and it's a close game in the bottom of the eighth, there's a good chance the wave is happening, right? Like there's a pretty solid chance you'll see someone has decided now is the time to start the wave. That was not happening at Dodger Stadium, Dan. These guys were invested. And like you said, I mentioned that to you and you had said, well, it's probably because of this win streak. And there's probably something to that, certainly.
Well, yeah, and they've won a World Series. I mean, they're in their prime right now. I think if the Twins were on a 10-game winning streak and they had won a World Series recently, I think the fans would be into it too.
I bet they'd still be doing the wave.
But they'd be doing it really, really well, I'm sure, David. No gaps in that wave.
Okay, well, with that, Dan, here, let's go to our segments.
Catch 'em all, Kirby Puckett!
Puckett's Picks winner.
David, it's happened. It's happened.
Ugh.
I have come back, and I have tied you in Puckett's Picks. You are 0 for your last 7.
I don't know. Here's the thing. So I was in Indianapolis, and you're like texting me, I got to make sure to get my picks in and whatnot. And it's really hard. I'm trying to learn board game rules. I'm trying to move pieces around. I'm walking all over the place around this convention center. I'm trying to look, okay, who hasn't died yet from the Twins lineup who I can actually pick? And it still doesn't matter, Dan. I don't know what it is, but I'm back now. I'm convinced me back in this chair is going to will a victory for me. So anyway, as it stands now, Dan took Polanco through some miracle, just chose Polanco's name out of a hat.
That's not a miracle. He's a great pick. I picked him because of his play. I had a reason, didn't I? Because of the shifting.
You and Hogue
because they shifted against him so much.
You talked about it at length with Hogue's last episode. But so Dan gets the victory. Polanco had 3 points. Hogue's, for the listeners, took Miranda, who had -1 point. And I have Correa, who scored 0. So I guess all things considered, I guess that's fine. So unfortunately, that does mean season standings now. Dan has now tied me at 13. The listeners are at 9. And I'll give you the points scored. I don't even want to. You've tied me. I feel like I don't even owe you this, Dan. But points scored, Dan has 188, I have 162, and the listeners have 151.
It's like baseball. Run differential always catches up with you. At the end of the season, it's always those teams, right?
A quick side note, too. The new meme format using the money ball. Billy, this is blank. His only problem is blank is just absolute gold.
Well, the Chris Sale one was pretty good. You know, his only flaw is he can't ride a bicycle.
Yes. And did you see the other one that was the meme of the guy putting the stick between the spokes, you know? And it's Chris Sale, Chris Sale, Chris Sale, and then he falls over.
Chris Sale, if anybody doesn't know, so he's the Boston Red Sox pitcher. He's a fantastic pitcher. We do wish him a quick recovery. We don't wish ill on people. He's only made, 2 starts this season because he's been dealing with other injuries, and the Red Sox are bad. But he's out for the year because he had a bicycling accident. So we wish him well. As a cyclist myself, I know that it happens. I just think it's a little odd that he's putting, his career at risk there by biking around Boston. He's a bazillionaire. What is he doing?
You do think he could afford an Uber, right? Like get it done, man.
Maybe he just really likes to cycle. Maybe. Anyway.
Could be.
Loves the cobblestones. We should move forward here to our next segment.
Beast versus Bench.
Is losing fun? Is losing fun?
So with Beast versus Bench here, I kind of wanted to pick Polanco, but he did have 3 strikeouts in the first game, and it's really hard when a guy strikes out that much. So I went with Arise because I thought in game 2 he really gave them a chance to win that with his 3-for-4 game. Scored a couple runs. He had a walk. He looked like himself, and in that leadoff spot when Luis Arise is getting on, that makes all the difference to this team.
Yeah, I think I'm going to give it to Buxton. He went 2-for-4 with 2 RBIs. He only played in 1 game, but again, I think we sort of have to grade Buxton on a curve based on how many games he's actually in. And especially in a 2-game series, playing 1 of 2 is, that's just about what everybody else on the team did as well.
That's true. Yes, everybody seemed like they got a day off. What about Bench for you?
So here's the thing. From what I understand, these last couple episodes, I can give this to whoever I want, right? Like Hogues is giving it to umpire Cruz. He's given it to the other team. Like it's a really confusing time for me to understand what exactly qualifies as bench. So I'm going to actually give this to the bench, the physical bench at Dodger Stadium for upholding these Twins who honestly, even had they been on the field, they would have been of no use, Dan.
David, that's pretty harsh. They're playing the best team in baseball here, and they played them kind of close in one of the games.
I just love how many qualifiers it took you. Like, you started that sentence, and folks, I could see Dan's mind turning like, uh-oh, I have painted myself into a corner. How many qualifiers do I have to throw out before I justify that was harsh?
Well, I did see, okay, well, we'll talk more about that later, but the Dodgers are really good. Like, that's just kind of what it comes down to. I'm going to put on my bench Max Kepler, who has been useless since, and again, I pointed this out last episode, you need all 5 of your toes. Like, you have 5 for a reason, and I think clearly he's not able to swing well enough with a bum toe. He made a nice defensive play, I think it was in game 1, a nice sliding catch, but at the end of the day, I don't think he's healthy enough to be playing, and yet, who else do you want? Do you want an outfield of Jake Cave, Celestino, and Nick Gordon? Like, is that what we're looking at instead of Kepler?
Well, that seems to be the daily lineup that Rocco doesn't mind trotting out there.
I guess so. And for the record, Kepler was 0 for 4 in game 2, and he was also 0 for 4 in game 1.
No, Kepler is the accurate choice, right? Like, if I was going to choose someone on the bench just for parity's sake, and I was just annoyed at Hogues just picking whatever. Like, it didn't even need to be a player. He's just like, you guys can't pick relief pitchers. And he's like, well, I choose the umpire's hat from first base. It seems unfair that his hat was a darker black than the other umpire's hats. It's like, what are you talking about, buddy?
Well, he's going to get his chance. He's filling in for me next week, or next series.
Yeah,
so
the only reason I'm being actually harsh here to Hogues is because he'll get his chance just real soon to come back at me. I had to deal with 2 episodes in a row. That's pretty rare that we do that, where there's 2 episodes out. Obviously, in all seriousness, it's really great to have Hogues on the show when we can't be here. Great fill-in host. Appreciate it greatly. But I'm still going to throw some shade your direction.
Well, let's move over to Rocco's Rewind.
Rocco's Rewind.
Dan, I've got some things to say, so why don't you start us off, and then I got some things to say to Rocco.
All right. So for a long time watching the series, I was like, well, I don't know what Rocco's going to do here. I mean, he's playing the Dodgers, but it was curious to me that in the 8th inning of game 2, he's bringing out Cole Sands to pitch, because we just saw Cole Sands fill in, I believe it was at the back after an Archer start, and he pitched the last 3 innings. And I thought, okay, well, they're finally piggybacking like we have been talking about for so long. Why aren't you saving him for one of their starts in the next series? So maybe he'll still use him. And actually, Cole Sands pitched pretty well. Like I said, he had the 1-2-3 inning. I was just a little bit surprised that he was even showing up here after pitching on Sunday.
Well, it's a little bit strange, right? Because he only got 1 inning. And so I'm confused what you're doing with him, because initially, like you said, the last time he was used as a length guy out of the pen. So is it just to like get him up and going? But you would think if he's going to be used as a length guy, an extra off day wouldn't necessarily be a bad thing, right?
Maybe he was so optimistic that the Twins were going to come back and force a bottom of the 9th and maybe a bottom of the 10th. Like he was ready for Cole Sands. Like, Cole was stretched out. He was ready to go 4. Anyway, what about you? You have a laundry list here you want to work through, so I'm just going to sit back and listen.
Well, there was just so much that happened while I was gone. But so we'll talk about this series first. 1, I like that you let Ryan in. Whatever, you knew this game was out of hand. Let him get his work in, see if he can work through it, work on a couple of pitches, whatever he's going to do with that extra time. In game 2, you should have pulled Gray as soon as he was in trouble. You could tell they were seeing the ball out of his hand. Rocco, you're playing the Dodgers. You're not playing the friggin' Royals, right? Like, it's time to pull him as soon as that lineup gets a hold of what he's doing. Like, you had guys you could go to. It's not like you were short-staffed. You were coming off an off day before the series started, and you used Pagan and McGill yesterday. You got options, Rocco. You should use them.
Yeah, I was really surprised by that, too. And Thielbar came in. He does get out of the jam, and Fulmer doesn't look great. But I agree. You got to pull him earlier, because this is a game that you can win.
Yeah, it's the only one that you really were going to have an opportunity to win, because obviously the first one didn't go your way. But so here's the thing. I have to talk about Rocco's ejection. I was so bummed that I didn't get to be on the podcast to talk about this. So I've watched that video of him getting thrown out. I don't know how many times.
Oh, it's hilarious.
But Rocco, obviously this is nuts, right? Like, we never see Rocco get this angry, and his post-game presser is just hilarious. But it's so funny. If you watch even the words that are coming out of his mouth and how his body moved, it did not match his anger. Like, there was no flow. There was no cadence to the way his arms were flowing with the words that he was saying. And I think it's because the muscles are unfamiliar with the anger flailing that Rocco was trying to work in. So it was kind of like, you ever watch a movie where, like, it's in a different language, right? And so you got the subtitles going, and they're a little bit
foreign
behind.
film. We call those foreign films,
yes,
David.
Foreign. I'm sorry. I can't keep up with the high culture that this podcast is apparently a big supporter of. But my goodness. So it's like that where the subtitles are just a little bit behind. So like there's a line that has like a ton of impact, but like the guy has already said it like 4 seconds ago. So it like doesn't hit quite the same. That's how Rocco's movements were. Like you can tell I use my hands when I speak. I'm a very expressive speaker in that way. And like when I'm making a point, I'm pointing my finger and like Rocco's hands are like 4 or 5 just milliseconds behind where his words are hitting. He just couldn't do it, Dan. His body is not prepared to function in that way.
I do hate when I'm watching a movie and it doesn't quite, like the audio doesn't quite line up with the video. So I do empathize with that because that is annoying. That's
Rocco in real life, Dan.
Can we move on to the Minnesota moment, or you got any more?
No, that's all I got for Rocco.
Minnesota moment.
I'm going to go with the Gallo home run. I just thought it was quintessential Minnesota, right? You're playing a team that's superior. And by the way, this week, the Mariners have been playing the Yankees, and the Mariners are beating the Yankees, and it's infuriating because it's like they're supposed to be the same team, and here the Mariners are doing something the Twins can't seem to do.
Getting it done, Dan. Your team out west is getting it done.
What do you got here, sir?
Yeah, so I think it's got to be in game 2 in the bottom of the 5th. The Dodgers have runners on, and Miranda makes a great play at third to get out of the bottom of the 5th to keep the game tied. And I really thought at that moment, you know what? They still got a chance here. Alas, they didn't, obviously. But in that moment, Dan, it seemed very important.
It did. It was important. And I think if you're not playing a team, the Dodgers are just unfairly good in some sense, I think. Like, they go out and they sign Freddie Freeman. They trade for Joey Gallo. Like, what are we doing here? They already got Trey Turner. They got Mookie Betts. They got Cody Bellinger batting 9th. Like,
I mean, it is getting easier and easier as the days move on to consider them evil Empire West, certainly.
Happy to do that. Well, let's go ahead and muse here, David.
I just don't know how it can get any better.
Mauer's musings.
So we just talked about just getting beaten up by the Dodgers. And here's the question I have for you, Dan. Let's just say, caution to the wind here, somehow the Twins make it to the World Series and the Dodgers are the opposing team from the NL. What percentage chance would you give the Twins against the Dodgers in the World Series, knowing that right now the rosters are locked? There's nothing you're going to be able to do to improve this team before the World Series comes, Dan.
10%? I mean, like, it can't be much higher than that because of the way that this series went, the way the whole season series has gone. The Dodgers have only gotten better since earlier in the year. I know the Twins got better pitching now. Too much has to go their way to beat the Dodgers in a series.
Well, and right now we know they would have gotten swept in a 4-game series if you just take all the games they've played against them so far this season.
Yeah, I would say. I mean, do you think it's any different than that?
No, I think if we played them 10 times, they might win 9 then.
My musing is to go back to Rocco's ejection, because again, one of the best moments of the season. I also love how articulate he is when he's angry. Like, I only wish that I could be that articulate. This is my question to you. Is Rocco not getting a suspension and just an undisclosed fine? Is that an admission from baseball that the replay got it wrong?
I don't think so. Because here's the deal. I think everybody in baseball, outside of that one video operator who saw that and decided that, oh yeah, that's a rule, we should definitely call it, everybody knew that this was wrong. And I don't think you can dictate what you're giving suspensions for based on whether what the person is upset about is accurate or not. And I think that's a really dangerous precedent. like if the call is just the worst call that baseball has ever seen, you're just out there just letting the F-bombs fly in your post-game press conference. Well, but it's okay because the call was it wasn't a good call.
That's a very mature response there, David. From you,
you and Hogs just throwing that word at me all the time.
Well, I mean, you're growing up. I think. I think it's clear that baseball was wrong, but you're right. You have to be consistent with laying down the punishments. But I was surprised he didn't get a suspension for as harsh as he was. Basically, going right at Major League Baseball itself.
All right, well, let's go ahead and grade this series, Dan. I'm sure people are curious what comes of it.
Series grades.
So, David, I'm looking at your grade on the note sheet. If I wrote that many Fs on the bottom of a student's assignment, Kufus, I think I'd lose my job for being too mean.
Yeah, I think it's deserved in this particular instance, just because it seemed like nothing went right in this particular series. And so I'm willing to do this. I wouldn't do this on a student's paper, Dan.
Well, I know.
That's a little
harsh. You think
harsh,
nothing went right, though? I think there were bright spots.
Ish. And I think maybe this is, I don't know, the split against the Blue Jays, this is the way that game ended on Sunday. Maybe that was still in the back of my mind. It just would have been nice to get a win here to sort of bounce back and get back to winning ways. And on top of that, losing the division lead, it's just too much, Dan. It's too much for me to handle with just one letter F.
Well, I will just say it's an F because the mission, I think we would agree, was to go down there and win a game, and they didn't do that, and they weren't all that close really at the end of the day.
All right, well, let's keep going here, Dan. Herbie's headlines.
I don't know, Jack. It looked like Herbeck pulled him off the bag.
Herbie's headlines.
This seems, David, like just the kind of story you need here late at night to cheer your spirits.
Yes, I need something to lift me up here, Dan. So, Little League World Series has started, and there's this really cool moment where a pitcher nails a batter in the head. Now, granted, I think it basically only got the kid in the helmet, but this really shook up the pitcher. You could tell the pitcher felt really bad about it. The infield was in, the coach came out, and the kid just couldn't get it together. But then you had the kid who got hit in the head walk over from first base to talk to the pitcher and say, "You're all right, man." And like, that's just so cool. And like, it just shows that there's something more here. It's not just sport. Right? I feel like Hogs was getting sentimental, made me want to get sentimental. But in this moment, it's like there are skills here being learned and taught that will be used in these kids' lives for the rest of their lives. And that's why I think why you and I really love baseball is because it was instilled in us at a very young age that this game can mean so much more than the scoreboard.
Yeah, I think as much as baseball has these unwritten rules and there's a lot of like cultural norms in baseball that we will make fun of and we will talk about not stealing second late in the game and things like that. But there are moments like this, or there's the Aaron Judge home run ball in Toronto to a kid who's just loved Aaron Judge his whole life, and then Aaron Judge invites him in. Like those human moments in this sport, I think you just get more of them.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, you're right. This was a very good, uplifting note to end on before we go into our Puckett's picks for the upcoming Angels series.
And we'll see you tomorrow night.
Puckett's picks.
So, David, now it's 13-9. There's a lot at stake. There's not a ton of series left. I mean, the listeners still could make a run here. So Hogs is going to stick with Miranda. Since he's co-hosting, he's going to pick for the listeners next week. So this will be, 5 in a row now with Miranda for him?
Yeah, 5 in a row, and I think it's probably the right choice, Dan. He's probably going to play the most games out of anyone you could pick, and he certainly seems to have the power to score some points.
And I also think, too, he's maturing as a hitter. He's got so many two-strike hits lately, even in the game here in Game 2 where he nearly had a home run down the line. Very next pitch, he pokes it the other way for a single. So love Miranda, love what he's doing in the middle of this lineup.
Yeah, I'm going to go ahead and take a rise because I'm so sick of picking Correa. Because if you're going to get booed everywhere, the least you can do is win me Puckett's picks, for crying out loud.
You haven't picked a rise in a very long time.
No, I'm back on that train. 8 to 10 points should win it for me this time around, I think.
Well, I'm going to go with Buxton because Rocco says he's going to play in center on Friday, which makes me think he's going to play 2 games out of the series. So I'm going to take Buxton, and hopefully he continues to hit he's at 27 home runs, which, by the way, if I think Hogs went back and listened to the season preview, I'm not looking very smart when we go back to do the recap of that.
I don't think any of us are, Dan, but here's to hoping we won't care what our predictions were because we'll be wearing our Twins 2022 World Series champions t-shirts.
Oh man, I can only hope. Well, a couple things. So I'm going into the woods, kind of. I'm going to Denver, and I'm actually going to go to a Rockies game, and then I'm going to go into the woods.
That's a musical reference, isn't it, Dan?
It is. You caught that there. See, very good. So Hogs is going to fill in for me for the Angels series, but then we have a good stretch here, David, where it's just you and me for a while.
Back to the usual way of doing things, Dan.
All right. Well, David, since it's been so long, I think you should probably send us out.
Yeah, will do. Well, folks, if you like what you hear, please tell a friend. You can follow us on Twitter at Men for the Win and find our Men for the Win Facebook page. Make sure you subscribe to the podcast to be notified when new episodes are available. And if you could leave us a rating, that'd be great. A reminder that episodes are now available on our YouTube channel. And if you could drop us a like and a subscribe, we'd greatly appreciate it. Thanks for listening. And as always, go Twins. That'll wrap up another episode of Men for the Win, a podcast hosted by David Kufis and Dan Thompson, 2 avid fans who appreciate well-played baseball, especially when it's done by the Twins. Thanks so much for listening, and as always, go Twins.